We're now joined live from Tel Aviv in Israel by political analyst Tom Gross to discuss the appointment of Liz Truss, both as leader of the Conservative Party and consequently as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Tom, thank you so much for joining us again here today on A News. It seems like it's been a long, hot summer waiting for today's announcement, which came about 2.5 hours ago. What's your initial reaction to this?
Well, yes. The contest only lasted 7 weeks, but somebody said it felt like the 30 Years' War. And why would they say that? Probably because there's been a real crisis gathering economically over those few weeks, and the government has been distracted with this leadership election. And Boris Johnson, although he has still been Prime Minister, has not been around much. He's been on 2 foreign holidays. He also went to Ukraine and so on. So Liz Truss comes in now. They say that all incoming Prime Ministers need to hit the ground running. But in Liz Truss's case, she's going to have to hit the ground sprinting, because there are a host of economic challenges ahead, really some of the biggest we've seen in our lifetimes. And also, to remind viewers, she wasn't actually elected by the population or by her members of parliament. There was no general election. The MPs, her members of Conservative members of parliament, preferred Rishi Sunak. She was voted in by about 170,000 Conservative Party members. Now, those 170,000 people, she got about 60% of them, are much older and more right-wing, even than Conservative Party voters, not just, certainly compared to the electorate. The population of the UK is about 70 million. So she has a lot on her in tray, and she's going to have to get some credibility pretty fast in order to get public support. So
a lot to be done. What do you think are what are the next steps that need to be gone on? Should the Queen she'll need to meet with the Queen, and I understand for the probably only the second time ever this meeting won't be happening at Buckingham Palace.
Well, that's right. So the Queen, who's 96 years old, is not, understandably, she's not in the best of health. Her walking is not particularly good. She is at one of her many castles, the one in Balmoral in Scotland. So it's been decided that the Queen really can't travel back to London for a 20-minute appointment for the new Prime Minister. So separately tomorrow morning, first Boris Johnson will fly to Aberdeen Airport and then travel to Balmoral Castle in Scotland, and on a separate airplane, Liz Truss will travel. Just to remind people, the Queen of England is officially the head of state, but the Prime Minister is the person who effectively runs the country. But Queen Elizabeth II, as head of state, has to appoint the Prime Minister. I just might add as a little interesting aside, they are both now called Liz, Queen Elizabeth and Liz. Not that that's very relevant, but I thought it's mildly amusing.
Indeed. But what isn't quite so amusing is the crisis that the United Kingdom finds itself in at the moment, the cost of living, the threats of energy cuts later this winter. This almost takes us back to pre-EU days, when in the early 70s we were seeing similar things. Even there's the question mark of whether there'll be more industrial action building up, which has already started.
That's right. Look, inflation is predicted to hit 18% according to one forecast and 22% according to another forecast. Energy bills for the average household are set to run into thousands of pounds. That's a lot of money for the average income earner in the UK. This is just the beginning. This could be the worst economic crisis of our lifetime. So one doesn't envy any incoming Prime Minister. It's going to be extremely difficult to deal with. She's not the most inspiring of politicians. Whatever one thought of Boris Johnson's policies, he definitely still has a big personality. And therefore, with speeches, he can kind of engage people. It will be harder for Liz Truss to do so. She's not the most inspiring of figures. it's going to be very, very difficult going ahead. I mean, some people question why anybody would want to be Prime Minister at the present time. Right. But we will have to wish her luck, because we don't want a worse economic situation than we've already got. I might just also add that just today, India, the former colony of the UK, has overtaken the UK to become the world's 5th biggest economy. So it's a little bit humiliating post-Brexit. The UK has slipped down the international rankings economically, and she's a nationalist and she wants to restore Britain's standing in the world, not see it slip down the economic tables.
I just want to pick up this idea of Liz's personality a little bit and just run with that. She's flip-flopped in so many different ways. She was a Liberal Democrat, now she's a Conservative. She was for Remain in the European Union, then she became, now she's supporting the fait accompli, the exit from the EU. She's very flip-floppy, and in the last weeks there's been criticism of her for not taking part in debates. Some of the interviews we've seen of her have been a little bit on the indecisive side, and yet one of the big questions today is, can Liz Truss unite what is very patently, obviously, a divided Conservative Party?
Well, it's going to be a very big task, but she's obviously going to have to try. One advantage, possibly, in that people don't expect that much of her, is that she may defy them. She may be better than we expect. The fact that she's not the greatest orator. I mean, Boris Johnson, as I've said, is a very good orator, but that doesn't necessarily mean he was a good Prime Minister. And I think most people want good, clear results. As far as the flip-flopping is concerned, her supporters argue that she hasn't really changed, that she was always a Eurosceptic, and that the EU changed. Or she would argue she's always been a classical liberal, and it's the situation that's changed, not her personality, not her policies. On the other hand, if she is a flip-flopper, or at least is willing to adjust her views, that could be a positive thing to show some flexibility, maybe a good thing in adapting to the situation.
And one of the things connected with that is how she will choose her cabinet in the next few days. There have been suggestions that it would be wise for her not to just pick from Johnson supporters. Do you have any ideas at this stage? I know it's only 2.5 hours since the final announcement was made, but do we have any ideas where she may be going with her cabinet?
Well, we have quite a good idea because it was kind of leaked in recent days. And obviously she wants to put people who are loyal to her in senior positions. She doesn't want to be undermined from inside her cabinet. She might look at what happened to Boris Johnson. In a way, Boris Johnson was kind of not just knifed in the back, but knifed in the front by many of his cabinet ministers, not I should add Liz Truss, but many of the others. So obviously she wants people who are loyal to her. She has positioned herself on the right of the Conservative Party, so we expect her to appoint other people to the right, or not the kind of more moderate Remainer types. They warn her that she has to be inclusive. She has to have people from all sides of the party to try and get stuff done. She mustn't be divisive and only take appointments from one side of the party. So we'll see, but it seems that she will put her own right-wing loyalists in key positions. One little positive I might mention is that she is the third female Prime Minister of Britain after Margaret Thatcher and Theresa May. And in fact, I think Britain, apart from Norway, is the only other country in the world to have 3 female Prime Ministers now. And the positive thing I wanted to add is that it's quite inclusive in terms of ethnicity as well as gender. So you have you have several people of colour who are both male and female who are rumoured to be entering the cabinet in senior positions, and that's good for modern Britain, that it should not be a kind of old boys network.
Absolutely.
And that she herself, by the way, comes from much more humble background than David Cameron and Boris Johnson, two of the recent prime ministers.
And even Rishi Sunak.
The most kind of privileged school in Britain.
I believe one of her selling points was that she had gone to a state school, as you say. So, but she's also trying to model herself on Margaret Thatcher. And it's interesting. You just reminded me about Theresa May, because I was only thinking of Margaret Thatcher and Theresa May. She kind of disappeared somewhere from my mind along the way. But we've had Boris Johnson, very forceful personality that everybody knows and recognises, and as soon as you hear him, you know you're listening to Boris Johnson. Margaret Thatcher as well, in similar vein. Liz Truss is said to be wanting to model herself on Margaret Thatcher. Is that something she can pull off?
Well, it remains to be seen, but there's nothing to indicate so far that she's a Margaret Thatcher. She does not have that kind of strong, bold personality. There's another important point. Thatcher came to power after two consecutive Labour prime ministers. Right. For those who remember, that's Harold Wilson and James Callaghan. Liz Truss comes to power after three other Conservative Party prime ministers. Now, it's incredibly rare in any democracy to have four prime ministers in a row from the same party. That would be David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, and now Liz Truss. People generally want change. They generally get tired of the same party in power. So she's not, you can say I'm a fresh start, like Thatcher was when Thatcher came in, but she herself has been a senior cabinet minister of the outgoing Boris Johnson cabinet. She was the foreign secretary, the foreign minister. So it's quite hard to come in as a fresh start when your party's been in office for more than a decade. But look, I don't want to, to predict things too much in advance. She may surprise us. She may, you never really know how someone will be in office until they're in office. So I think we should give her a chance. But it's certainly an extremely difficult situation she comes into.
Well, in any actor, you never know what their performances will be until they put the costume and the makeup on. So becoming Prime Minister, as you suggest, might just show a different Liz Truss from the one that many have seen. Now, the opposition parties, of course, have already responded. From the Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish, the First Minister of Scotland, has intimated that she wants to work with Liz Truss. Keir Starmer, understandably, while congratulating her on her appointment, has said it's time for a change for the many reasons that the Labour Party would make. Even the other unofficial outsider, Larry the Cat, who's had a website, Larry for Leader, for the last few days, he's digging in a little bit, suggesting that I just saw on Twitter feed suggesting that Liz Truss's days are already numbered as Boris's supporters will be putting in a vote of no confidence for her. Whether or not that will happen remains to be seen. But is this the end? Let's just wrap up with: is this the end of the line for Boris, or will he come back as a phoenix and try and take back the role of Prime Minister so that he can be elected out of office, which is what he so dearly wanted?
Well, yes. As much as all her other problems are enormous, her biggest problem may be Boris Johnson, the man she's succeeding as Prime Minister. To remind people, Boris Johnson, a little under 3 years ago, won an 80-seat commanding majority in a general election. And he had wanted to be Prime Minister for his whole adult life. And he does not like the idea of being basically chucked out of office by his own MPs so quickly. And his ego is bruised, and he's already putting out rumours that he'd like to come back. Of course, he's looking to other countries where other populist leaders have either come back or want to come back. For example, Berlusconi in Italy, Donald Trump in America is rumored to be running again. Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel is running again at the general election in November in Israel. So Boris Johnson too wants to run again. He thinks he's a league ahead of other British politicians, including Liz Truss, and it will be quite easy. He's very newsworthy, so the slightest comment from him will be headline news. And yes, he did quite badly, in my view, as Prime Minister, but he still has this fantastic charisma and personality about him, so he can drum up, support. He'll also look back in Britain itself, where someone like Winston Churchill lost power and then came back again. So I think that Boris is going to be lurking around in the background, or possibly even in the foreground, and secretly trying to undermine her. And that's going to be very, very hard for Truss to deal with. In fact, I think in his closing appearance in the House of Commons in July, he said, "Hasta la vista, baby," which is a kind of, cinematic line. Most people have a fear. Most people associate with making a comeback.
Yes.
And he has got a big ego. He won't like the fact Cameron was Prime Minister for longer than he was. So I very much think we have not seen the end of Boris Johnson, and it will just add to the difficulties of stabilising the situation in Britain if he's also trying to undermine her in addition to the opposition parties.
Well, it's just early hours for Liz Truss. So as you say, we should wait to give her a chance to sprout and grow and bloom and see how things go. Tom, thank you so much for that broad analysis of what has been and what could be. We watch avidly to see how the UK welcomes and deals with its new Prime Minister. Thank you so much for joining us today on A News.
Thank you.